believed that Jesus was going to come into the fullness of his kingdom right here on earth in a very short time, and that as the new king, they were going to be his right-hand men. And so they were constantly bickering among themselves as to who among them was the greatest. And there was one case even when two of the brothers, James and John, had their mother go to Jesus and ask Jesus if, when he comes into his kingdom, can my boys be on your right and left hand? And so there was constant tension among the apostles. And I want to look at a passage right now in Luke. And I think it's important to recognize the tension and the ambition that was in them in order to really understand this passage. Now, I think the passage is listed as Luke 17, at least in my notes it is. That's not correct. It's Luke 7. I made a mistake when I wrote the notes. It's Luke 7. But in Luke chapter 7, verses 5 and 6, here's what we read. These are the apostles making a request of Jesus. They say to him, the apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. Sounds like a good question, doesn't it? Innocent enough. A good biblical question. Increase our faith. I mean, all of us would want to have that as a prayer request. If we could talk to the Lord, that might be the thing that would be first on our lips. First thing out of our mouths, first thing in our hearts. Lord, increase our faith. But when you look at the answer Jesus gave to them, and the story then that he tells right after the answer that he gave to them, I suspect that there was something that had to do with ambition behind this statement, increase our faith. I suspect that they were thinking more in terms of them being great men of faith than they were in thinking in terms of just being servants of God. And so Jesus responds to them, and his response was pretty clear. But when you look at it in this context, I think you can see with me that he's really trying to adjust their thinking. He's trying to refocus their thinking, because here's what Jesus says. He says to them, the Lord answered, if you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, may you be uprooted and thrown into the sea, and it would obey you. Can I think about this with me? They are here, they're asking Jesus to increase their faith. If I'm correct, that there's ambition behind that, and Jesus is seeing that in their hearts, then what he's telling them is, stop focusing on becoming great men of faith. Because even a little bit of faith placed in the great God we have will get great results. And he's trying to take their focus away from themselves, away from becoming great men of faith, and put their focus on the great God that we have, that we put our faith in. And so that's the first thing he wants to do, is to adjust their focus and adjust their thinking. But then he goes on in the next verses, in verse 7. I'm just going to read this to you. It's not going to be on the screen. I'm just going to read it to you. But then he goes on, he says this. He says, suppose one of you had a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Would he say to the servant when he comes in from the fold, come along now and sit down to eat? Would he not rather say, prepare my supper, get yourself ready, and wait on me while I eat and drink? After that you may eat and drink. Would he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? You see, I think that what Jesus is doing here as he follows along in the answer to their question, increase our faith, make us great men of faith. Now he's saying, is the master the one that serves the servant? That you want to lift yourselves up by being great men of faith. Does it make sense then to you that God would do that so you can be great men of faith? The master doesn't serve the servant serves the master. And so what he does then, he concludes that section by saying this. So you also, when you've done everything you were told to do, you should just say this: we're unworthy servants, we've only done our duty. I think the verse there is, we're merely servants and we have simply done our duty. And so what Jesus is telling them is this, that they have to have humble hearts. They can't come with ambition. Even a good prayer offered with ambition as the motivation is a distortion of what God has for us. And so he corrects their thinking, he corrects their motivation. And I want to read you a little paragraph here from a book I was reading this afternoon. It's called A Tale of Three Kings. It's by a guy named Gene Edwards. It's a great, great little book, easy to read, not easy to digest because it's really very, very thoughtful. He says, many pray for the power of God more every year. Those prayers sound powerful, sincere, godly, and without ulterior motive. But hidden under such prayer and fervor, if you read the context here, he's saying often, hidden under such prayer and fervor, are ambition, a craving for fame, the desire to be considered a spiritual giant. The person who prays such a prayer may not even know it, but dark motives and desires could be in his heart, in your heart, in my heart. It's possible for us to pray for the right thing, but with the wrong motives. And if that's the case, then the Lord wants to change that in our hearts, and he corrects that here in the apostles. So the very first thing, the first decision we have to make is a decision that says, God, here I am. I'm an unprofitable servant. Do with me whatever you will, whether it be prominent or not, whether it be big or small, whatever it is, I am yours for you to do with me what you desire. I was reading some notes from a friend of mine. His name is Chester Martin, who really was my first mentor in pastoring. He was over me in the very first church I pastored. And I just ran across these notes from a message that he gave. And I just read those today too. But here's a statement Chester made. He said, we don't have enough people doing great things because we don't have enough who are willing to do menial things. You hear that? He said, we don't have enough people doing great things because we don't have enough who are willing to do menial things. And he's hitting at the same point that Jesus is here. Focus on how great God is. Submit your life to God. Let him determine the course of your life. Let him give you the dream, but then don't hold on to that dream as if it's yours and it's going to make you something, and you want to be that something. And so the wrong motivation then creeps in and starts to take hold of our hearts. Bill Jackson, who teaches the Nothing's Going to Stop It seminar that we're going to have here in a month, Jax used to say this, particularly he said this when you're planting a church. He said, no one comes with seniority. You might have been a pastor in your background, you might have been an elder in your previous church, you might have been the adult Sunday school teacher or whatever, but he said no one comes with seniority. Everybody needs to come with this simple attitude. They pick up a broom, they get at the end of the line, and they ask, where can I serve? And that's crucial. That's the crucial decision for any of us to fulfill our God-given dreams. So at the very beginning, the first step is adjust our hearts and walk in humility. And folks, that's a lifelong endeavor. It's something that when we think we've got it, we really don't, because if we think we have it, then by virtue of thinking we have it, we're contradicting the very principle of humility. And so it's just a lifetime of growth. But it's something that we have to aspire to. It's something we have to have as a value. We have to continually just open our hearts to God and say, God, here I am. I'm just your servant, and whatever you want to do with me is great. And so that humility is the foundation. The second thing is we need to make the decision to seek wisdom and ask God for guidance. It's pretty simple, but it's something we need to pointedly do. As we're pursuing the dream that God has for us, as we're pursuing God's will for our lives, of course, we're doing this, but we need to pointedly, specifically, as the dream is coming clear, then we need to spend time just asking God for guidance. God, okay, this dream is forming in my heart, in my mind, and Lord, I just need to ask you right now, what is the next step? What's the next step? For us, newlyweds, going into ministry, it was, send some applications out to schools that you think might be the place you'd want to go. That was just a very simple next step. Sometimes the next step is simply, get on the phone and call this other person that you know who is already doing something similar to this. But whatever the next step is,